Hello and welcome to the Finger Lakes region here in Watkins Glen, New York. One of the premier road racing facilities here in the United States, and really it's back-to-back race coverage weeks for me, where you get to go to Road America and then Watkins Glen right after it. I mean, gotta say I'm pretty blessed some of the times that what I get to do and the locations. I mean, you can't beat the scenery, can you? It's absolutely beautiful here. So this is the first time I've come to Watkins Glen for any reason since 2019, for obvious reasons, right? I think a lot of people over the years haven't been able to experience the things that they like to do or maybe want to do. But we're back here. This is the first time that I've been able to cover a race here at Watkins Glen, New York. So I'm really excited for that opportunity, and I hope you'll enjoy my coverage this weekend. This is the Salen's 6 Hours at the Glen. It's the third of four major endurance races here in the United States for the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. There's a bumper entry list of 48 cars here amongst the 5 classes of competition. Now, it's kind of interesting that the last couple of IMSA races I've been to have been, back-to-back with IndyCar races. So it's been kind of a limited class structure. I think at Long Beach it was the prototypes or the DPIs, and then the 2 GTD cars, or classes I should say. Are they honking at me? No, they're just honking at other people. There are people just honking at the, they're actually repairing some catch fence over there. Apparently a Porsche did a gigantic barrel roll and actually got over the guardrail over there earlier today. So I guess that's what they're doing. They were honking, and I'm like, should I not be up at the grandstand right now? I don't know. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. At Long Beach, you had the 2 GT classes, and then you had the DPIs, and then here, or at Detroit, it was only prototype and then GTD AM. All the classes are here, meaning DPI, LMP2, LMP3, GTD Pro, and GTD AM. So again, you have that big entry list, and what's amazing to me here is I sat here for the first, here at the S's, for the first practice session for IMSA, and the closing rates are incredible in this series. I mean, they really are, because those DPI cars come up through there, and they come up on the GTD cars and the LMP3s, which are probably going 10, 20, 30 miles an hour slower, and they have to slice through traffic. It's amazing. But my coverage of this event will really kind of start in earnest tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll have full coverage of the 6 hours as well. But kind of like I've been doing the last couple of weekends, I kind of want to touch on some other news stories. You probably clicked on this video for a completely other reason other than the scenery here at Watkins Glen, New York. Lola apparently is going to return. And if you don't know what Lola is, people of a certain age, maybe me or even older than me, remember Lola as a chassis manufacturer back when chassis manufacturers were really a thing, that won the Indianapolis 500, raced at Le Mans, raced in the American Le Mans Series, raced all over the globe, Formula One. Anywhere you think a race car should be racing, Lola was racing. Well, Lola, much like Reynard, if you remember back to Detroit when I made my Reynard video, or my Renski video, they also went into receivership. Now, they went into receivership around 2012. And they've been a dormant company since then. But kind of the connection here with Watkins Glen and the 6 hours is that one of the owners of the Gradient Racing team, which is an Acura GTD team, has actually purchased the assets of Lola, meaning the intellectual property. Those are the logos and the designs of the cars themselves, but it was also purchased the factories and the warehouses. So that isn't just the most important thing about all of this, because in the media, they've been talking about Lola coming back to racing. Obviously, if you're going to buy a race car company, you probably need to start building race cars. And one of the events that was mentioned as a possibility for Lola to return is the Indianapolis 500. And I think that was a racer that had that report. And first of all, naturally, you need to be skeptical about any sort of a thing where you're saying, yeah, we're not going to do spec cars at the Indianapolis 500 anymore. Because, ultimately, the partnership that Dallara and IndyCar has is extremely tight knit, or they've really got their claws in there. And frankly, I think IndyCar themselves isn't necessarily interested in, you know, I don't think that's the business that they're in anymore. I don't think they're necessarily about, this is going to sound weird, I don't think they're necessarily about automotive competition anymore. I think it's all about partnerships, making sure that those partners are satisfied and stick around, and that's it. It's not necessarily, you know, IndyCar isn't a series of competitors anymore. You have the drivers, you have the teams, and yes, those are the competitors, but in a lot of ways they're partners too, because with the team money, which is essentially a franchise system that isn't a franchise system, the teams get money just for participating. They get $1.5 million or whatever it is dollars a year just for participating, and there's not a whole lot of like prize money. There's not necessarily an incentive from that perspective to do well. So that's the other thing you hear about with engine manufacturers. The rules are totally designed, as we've seen, to appease Honda and Chevy. And frankly, there isn't really a reason they shouldn't be, because, again, they're the partners, I'm using that word now, that have stuck by you this entire time. Well, Dallara is the same way. They are now a partner. They're not a competitor. So if Lola were to come back to the Indianapolis 500, it would take a total rethink of what IndyCar racing is, what an IndyCar is, because right now, unfortunately, and I say as unfortunately as a purist, because to me, the racing car is just as important as, you know, as a competitor as any other part of a racing team. You have the crew, which has to do its job. You have the driver, which has to do its job. And you have to have the car, which will do its job. And each element of that kind of trifecta of racing performance is what creates the stories that we tell for generations and generations. And when the cars become not the story anymore, you lose an element of racing. But right now, to IndyCar, I think the car is like a ball in sports. And you would have to get back to a point where you're trying to build a better mousetrap for one reason or another. And I don't know what that would be. It would take a rethink. You know, you wouldn't have cars anymore that look like quote-unquote Indy cars, potentially. Certainly not the way they look now, where they're essentially just a tribute band to a DP01 merged with a Reynard. You wouldn't have that anymore. You would have to change the rules, whether you reduce the tire width. Maybe you say you have 50 gallons of fuel for the entire race. You figure out how to get it done. That's a scenario in which you could see real competition on the technological side, and chassis competition come back, because you would have to build something to those rules. But right now, the structure isn't there for it, and that's disappointing to me as a fan. But I suspect I'm in the minority, because again, when they came out with the new body kit was a cover band, and that seems to be what pleases a lot of people, and that's fine. I like how the car looks, and I like how it races, and it's a very competitive series. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, it's missing an element, and I think that element is kind of one of the things that's here in IMSA, which is that technological diversity. So the other thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that Helio Castroneves won an SRX race, and that means, I guess, that Helio Castroneves will be a participant in the Daytona 500 next year. And I think that's very exciting. I kind of think back into the memory banks, and I know Jacques Villeneuve won the Indianapolis 500 and raced in the Daytona 500 this year. But actually an active IndyCar driver racing in the Daytona 500, I want to say that hasn't happened since 1993 with Al Unser Jr. I guess it depends how you consider like a Juan Pablo Montoya or a Dario Franchitti. But I would say like a driver who is full-time in IndyCar, I don't think it's happened since Al Jr. So, it's kind of funny. The last time a four-time winner defended his crown was 1993. It was Al Unser Sr. And the last time a current IndyCar driver ran the Daytona 500 was a full-time IndyCar driver was Al Unser Jr. Even though I know you could probably say, well, Robbie Gordon ran the Indy 500 and Tony Stewart ran the Indy 500 and John Andretti ran the Indy 500, I guess, but they were full-time NASCAR drivers at that point. So it was really more exceptional that they were coming over to Indy rather than the IndyCar driver going to Daytona. But when you think about it, the idea that Helio could be in a competitive car. I know so many people have mentioned the Project 91 Trackhouse project. That seems like it would be a very easy way to do things. It would depend if SiriusXM and Arctic Wolf and the sponsors of Meyer Shank Racing wanted to get behind such a project. But I think that we know Trackhouse can produce a very competitive car. I think Helio would be in a competitive car regardless of what happens, as a Lamborghini is very loud going by. I like that. I don't know if that's as good as the Radicals were last couple weeks, but it's a pretty nice sound, right? I think Trackhouse is a possibility for Helio. I think Team Penske's a possibility. They could always enter an extra car, and they did for Austin Cindric back in the day. I think it would be a good PR move. It would, again, be all dependent on sponsorship. And I don't know if Team Penske necessarily, I'm sure they would want to work with Helio again, but getting all those moving parts together. I don't know where else Helio could go. I really just think it would be Trackhouse or Penske. But if you say those are the two options, I would say, yeah, those are probably two pretty good options if you're thinking about the potential of a race car driver jumping into his first Daytona 500 and potentially having a chance to win it. And you know, I think Helio would have a chance to win it, but I think at the same time, there's a very high possibility that he would get crashed because those plate races are just insane, or I guess super speedway races, whatever we want to call them. So here we are at Watkins Glen. Can't wait to share more sports car coverage with you guys this weekend. Be sure to subscribe for that, and I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Got lots of more stuff coming, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.